dangerous because it targets and grooms LGBTQ plus youth and seeks to change who they are. It's a range of dangerous and discredited practices that falsely claim to change orientation. Minors are especially vulnerable, and conversion therapy can lead to depression, homelessness, and suicide. To date, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Utah, Virginia, Vermont, Washington, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico have all laws and regulations protecting anyone under 18 from the harmful practice of conversion therapy. 8 of these state laws or regulations were enacted under Republican governors. A growing number of municipalities have also enacted similar protections, including at least 70 cities and counties in Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Washington, and Wisconsin. Now, conversion therapy is just one way pastors can impact negatively non-heterosexual youth. As long as religious counselors and pastors use their authority and education in the field they're licensed and credited with, that's the best place to be. A lot of people make major life decisions concerning things affected by belief. Who they marry, sexual desires, children, obviously their beliefs, their careers, they're all based on how people believe. And when people believe that choices basically impact their eternity, you have an extra layer of possible spiritual abuse. And when I say possible, I don't mean it's mandatory. There are a lot of churches, denominations, and areas where churches don't abuse the exaggerated authority and education that leaders have, but it's very rampant. Women are probably the most vulnerable, because in a lot of conservative settings, women are perpetually viewed as children under the guardianship of men. Children can usually grow up and have some level of autonomy, while women, regardless of their age, are viewed as property and lesser than. And that's very common in the more conservative forms of Christianity. Not all, but I would say the majority. And when the church, Catholic or Protestant, has consistent behavior of covering up all forms of abuse, specifically in minors, be very careful who and why you go to a pastor for advice. Many people who have survived the worst forms of childhoods were traumatized again by being counseled by the wrong type of person. Choose wisely who you choose to seek mental health advice from and life-changing decisions and education. Many women have lost their lives, their safety. Children sometimes have lost quality life and an accepting family by being counseled by pastors who did not have ethics or integrity. And I'm not going to imply that all psychologists have ethics and integrity just because they meet and exceed state requirements. I'm saying where there is religion, Where there are men exclusively in positions of leadership, where there is spiritual authority, there is a higher chance of abuse and misuse. And queer people are very vulnerable regardless of age. Women, very vulnerable. Children, very vulnerable. Any time of life where you're making very distinct, life-changing decisions, religion can indoctrinate people and can control people. That's why when you want to deal with anything that isn't about faith, go to someone with a master's or doctorate degree. And if you don't fit the cis heteronormative expectation, go and see a medical doctor, a medical professional, a gynecologist, people you can trust. But never stop researching people. Always educate yourself so you're not as vulnerable as people who just go in without looking up who they're meeting. And I've met a lot of people in group therapy that went to the wrong pastor, the wrong counselor, the wrong psychologist, and you can experience more trauma going to the wrong sources. That's why it's always good to know the difference between a counselor and a psychologist. Pastors may or may not have the same ethical expectations, legal accountability. Anytime you go to someone who isn't directly under a state legal medical board, there is less accountability, less ethical review, and there's not as many checks and balances. It's harder to prosecute people that aren't under a medical board. And we've talked in depth that the more fundamentalist a denomination is, the more hierarchy exists under the control of cis white men. You're going to have limited to very, depending on where you are, limited to no accountability. Because hierarchies like Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, Southern Baptist, they're all about hiding, stonewalling, forgetting. It's never about the victim. It's always about preserving the church's reputation at the expense of everyone else. That's why go to somebody who has an ethical standard and much more accountability. I'm not saying don't ever go to a pastor. I'm saying if it's about theology, go for it. But if it's not about theology, go and see a doctor, a shrink, whoever you need to see. And better yet, find a specialist within the field you need who has more training. Sometimes psychologists transfer patients to a specialist because ethical psychologists won't overstep their education and their credentials. If you need sex counseling or child care therapy, where you need someone who has a specialty, a special credential in dealing and assisting kids who are LGBTQ+, go find one who has that specialty. It definitely makes a world of difference. Don't rely on religion to heal you in matters that don't deal with theology. I spent 30 years of my life trying to fix depression with prayer. It doesn't work. And religion, Christianity especially, is nefarious for consistently, not everywhere, but consistently denying mental health as a sin problem, a personal problem, or a relationship problem. And a lot of the Southern Baptist fundamentalist churches actually tell their members, not everywhere, but a majority, that psychology is how the devil gets to your children and gets into your life. These are not pastors and churches you want to be around. Avoid these kind of people. The church is known for drawing narcissists. Not every time, not everywhere. But where there is access to children and vulnerable women, predators are very nearby. And that's why I always tell people, go to a psychologist, go to a specialist. You need to be under the ethical boundaries of someone who has so much more accountability, and they can be held accountable in ways pastors usually never can be. And growing up in any form of the queer groups and LGBTQ plus areas, you're going to face a different kind of possible trauma going to religious groups who won't accept you for who you are, or worse, try to get you, what I call, to straighten yourself out. And it's all about toxic masculinity and femininity, because a lot of conservative churches teach men they have to behave in a certain way. And manhood and womanhood is a spectrum. The problem is a lot of people's lives have been ruined because religious people and secular people can't accept people for who they are, not for who they want them to be. And everyone deserves the best, most educated doctor to help them reach their goals. Not a pastor who has a 90% chance of barely having any psych experience beyond Psych 101. Because about 10% of pastors in churches have a psych degree, let alone a master's or doctorate degree. Don't go to someone who isn't qualified. Go to people who have your best interests in mind, who aren't just re-indoctrinating you and actually want what's best for you, even if it goes against beliefs that you've learned.